Okay, cool. So I'd also like to welcome everybody to today's session. And I'm really very much looking forward to the next 60 minutes in which we'll talk and discuss about current research, developments in practice, and also future challenges in, the broader research area in which the Scalable Biometric project is situated. And Heiko already said it, that is usable security. And Stefan and me are super excited that we have the pioneer of usable security research here as our discussant today, Angela Sasse. And basically 2 decades ago, she wrote what became really the seminal paper of usable security. And the paper is entitled "Users Are Not the Enemy." I really recommend you read it if you have not done so yet, because the paper started what became a very active, visible, and exciting field of research. And so, it's my pleasure to welcome Angela Sasse from the Ruhr University Bochum. It's really fantastic to have you here. And before Angela will give a brief talk about her work, I'll introduce her and just point to a few of the things she's doing and working on. So by training, Angela is an occupational psychologist, and she has degrees from the University of Wuppertal and the University of Sheffield. She then completed her PhD studies at the University of Birmingham and then spent sort of a large part of her career as a professor of human-centered technology at University College London. She was also head of the British Research Institute for Empirical Safety Research. And in 2015, she was awarded the fellowship of the Royal Academy of Engineering. And then finally, in 2018, she returned to Germany as a professor of human-centered security at the Ruhr University Bochum. I think what makes Angela's research so influential is that she's really working at this intersection of academia and industry. So she's working with many startups. She's a member of several advisory boards, and she's also speaker of the the Digital Consumer Protection Advisory Council. I think that's what it's called, the Beirat Digitaler Verbraucherschutz of the German Federal Office of Information Security. So the talk is entitled "Usable is Not Enough Towards Human-Centered Positive and Inclusive Security." And I think Angela will talk a bit about why we often still consider humans the weakest link, and why we should really stop fixing humans through education, persuasion, and fear appeal. And with that, I hand over to you, Angela, and we're very much looking forward to your talk. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to switch to and I think I need to swap displays, right? And I need to go. Sorry, I need to go to I was on the last slide, not the first one. Let's start. Okay, yes. As you said, I started in psychology and ended up in doing a PhD in computer science. And when I joined University College London in 1990, I really fell in with the internet, the crowd that was doing real-time multimedia over the internet. And it was, of course, this hugely exciting, so I look at, basically, to a certain extent, I look at all this Zoom stuff and everything that's been going on in the past couple of years. And then I think of my old mentor, Professor Peter Kirstein at UCL, who's the person who brought really internet research to Europe and set it up, when he moved back from Stanford to the UK. And I think he must be smiling down at us from heaven that finally this technology we worked at in from the early 1990s has now ended up in virtually everyone's office and home. And it was really, I fell into security. So I saw myself really as a usability person working on audio and video quality, and we were experimenting with physiological measurements. Also always had a slight fascination with with the economic concepts, actually seeing on, how much are people prepared for certain services, under which circumstances, that can, the pricing of certain services can really make a big difference to acceptability and adoption. But then by sheer accident, really, I fell into, I wanted to do that. It fell into security when a collaborator in a company I was working with at the time said, couldn't you do a quick study and tell us why these stupid users can't, it's like the way they spit it when I say it, right? Where these stupid users can't remember their passwords. And talking about economics and costs, what the problem the security people had was that the accountants were, standing in their office and said, look, the number of people we're employing at the help desks to that help employees change their passwords is going up and up and up, right? It's trebled every year for the past 3 years, right? This can't go on, stop it, right? and that's why they came to me and said, like, all these people can't remember their passwords, can you tell us why that is? And they expected me to kind of like come back with a training measure, that we could train people to memorize passwords. But when you looked at these people had between 60 and 64 different passwords, complexity 8 digits long, complexity 4, 6-digit pins, and they were changed on a monthly basis. And basically you don't really need to go very far in your psychology textbook to basically go like, I'm sorry, but you're asking people to do something that's just not humanly possible. And there's no training intervention you can do to change that, right? It's something, at some point when they kept asking me that, I said, like, yes, okay, I'm going to need all your employees. They need to take 6 months off, and we're going to go on a course to become memory athletes. So if you can do without your workforce for 6 months, we can train them to become memory athletes. So by the way, when they come back, they still need to spend about 30 to 60 minutes a day practicing all the techniques they've learned, so they can remember it, right? And you just, to some extent, it even takes a while. You think this is like the absurdity of what they were asking would emerge. But this has been an ongoing theme, and it's still not really changed very much in the past 20 years, is my argument. And it really needs to. It took, when we take passwords as a result of that paper, users are not the enemy, it took, paper 1999. So it took a very long time for this to change. I think probably the biggest sort of vindication was when in 2017, the researcher from the US National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, that sets de facto guidelines for security standards, because it sets the guidelines what everybody who does business with US government has to comply with. And the rest of the world basically goes and copies these rules and then turns them into policies. When he said in 2017, I'm really sorry, so I issued these guidelines that to be secure, passwords had to be of this length and complexity. And I was wrong. Basically, people just can't do this, and that was basically that was a mistake. Now, okay, so he recommended in 2003. We published "Users Are Not the Enemy" in 1999, and interestingly, I know for a fact that somebody from the Human Factors Department at NIST went to see him and pointed this out to him, but he just couldn't. He just couldn't see that, and it's this fallacy that security people keep falling for, that the stronger you make security, the more effort you make in the name of security, the better your security will be. And I think fortunately with some of the government agencies, it's changed now. So the National Cybersecurity Center, which is like the BSI here in Germany, changed its rules in 2016 and said, if you're relying on users to remember complex passwords as a way of securing access to your system, your security is just not very good, and you should make it easy you need to make it easier for users and help them along. But if you look at the industry as a whole and you look at what the vendors say, I just don't see the change happen there, and the way that the humans are cast by the vast number of security practice and also still by quite a number of security researchers is this kind of, I think you can stop, it's this human is the weakest link, it's a meme that really is persuasive. And what we have is a multi-billion-dollar per year security awareness, education, and training industry being is built on top of that, follows it through. And that's actually a really worrying trend where you can see that even companies that are really whose core expertise is technical, are actually see this as an easy market to jump into and expand their business into. And the real problem is that the level of competence when it comes to, do these people know anything about learning, about behavior change? No. And even what should be their core competence, the kind of messages they give, what they advise is correct behavior to protect yourself, is often wrong. It's often wrong. It's certainly communicated in a lousy fashion, lots of contradictions, ambiguity and things. You can see the poor user's cognitive workload, basically going up. And then there is this idiotic assumption that you get people to change behavior by bombarding them with lots of information. And so they're really, they're not particularly literate, and also I always like this, right? If you look in the top left, unpredictable humans, right? This is actually one of the hardest things I have to get across to when I speak to security managers. They build up this myth where somehow the human is just is evil and gets in the way, and I go like, no, by and large human behavior is predictable. I can certainly the behavior they show in response to what you're asking them to do is utterly predictable. But they're building up this myth, and it really is. I can trace this back to this man called Bruce Schneier, who's one of the most influential security practitioners, now researchers. He works now at Harvard in the public health school. But he coined this phrase, the weakest link, in a book in 2000. And even though I did write to him at the time and tried to point out to him that he shouldn't say that the consequence of this is that it's like we had this human error in the safety area, right? That it's taken that the human is at fault, that people are doing something wrong and it's their fault, rather than looking at what am I asking them to do, and is that behavior really possible? And I know that he doesn't think that anymore, and he doesn't use the phrase anymore, but he's still, it would be really great if he could come out openly and actually say it, and tell the whole security industry to stop using this phrase, because as you've seen at the moment, it's still completely prevalent, and this continuing misconception, it's the human fault, they are the problem, and we have to fix them somehow, right? That's stopping progress. So this actually looking at, what are the tasks we are presenting people with? What are the communications we're giving them? It's utterly not there. It's just this finger pointing there, security awareness and training is seen as the easy option to fix. And it's but if you look at a lot of the security mechanisms, so when you've got on the right hand, you've got captchas, so you're making every human prove they are human, right? You're building, you're basing, you're designing a system based on that. I mean, that's just absurd. I think there was just a study from Cloudflare the other day that we spend about 500 person years every day just on doing captchas globally. It's a bit, could maybe be something sensible that, and pushing people to, so our passwords don't work. So that instead of looking at other solutions, we'll just put more and more layers on top of it and create more and more cognitive hoops that people have to jump through, so I don't just have to remember my password now. I have to basically, it's like 12 or 14 characters long, and now I have to visualize it and then start counting and then putting this in via this absurd menu mechanism. It's just so it's just pretty laughable, and most of IT security is like that. It's like this ironing board where the owner of the hotel wants to stop the ironing board from being stolen and just bolts this metal plate on there, and the owner goes, great, right, now the iron won't be stolen. Yes, but you've reduced the ironing surface by 40%, and so it's not going to take you 40% longer to get your trousers ironed, right? And that is what security is doing to most employees and consumers today. If it's not just stopping us from, like the captchas do, some people just give up and stop using online services. It's just extracting this massive productivity toll from us, and it's something that has to stop. It gets worse because if you're trying to say in this paper is, if you make the users your enemy, you're looking at the wrong thing, but we're making them even more the enemy because we're now attacking them in the name of security by changing them, by sending them phishing messages, and the poor employees in organizations, of course they feel tricked and they feel betrayed, and embarrassed. And so now think about, what does that do to people's perception of security, right? That is something that is important and that you feel good about taking responsibility for? No, not at all. It's got exactly the opposite effect, and that is terrible, given that the rate at which we are being attacked, the increasing sophistication with which individuals and organizations are being attacked really is going up, and it's going up at a frightening rate. And our defense is basically as incompetent as that. And it's very, very worrying. I think the problem is a lot of people have stopped listening because their experience has been, is what they tell me in the name of security, I can't do it anyway, right? So they've stopped taking it seriously. So Douglas MacArthur said, never give an order that can't be obeyed, because people will just stop obeying orders in general once they've experienced that. And I think in this whole notion of that we just need to train people in the kind of environments you're looking at. I think that whole paradigm becomes utterly ridiculous, right? If you can't make security and privacy virtually seamless in those environments, how much time and effort would people have to spend? They never get from one end of the smart building to the other if we carry on designing, or not designing, just bolting in horrible security mechanisms like that. We've really got to restructure security practices and policies, and they need to be integrated into the workflow as we would do it with any other additional as we would do in HCI. You would design it, you would try and integrate it, reduce the friction, reduce the disruption as much as possible. You don't have to tell a usability person that, but the security people, I'm afraid, still haven't got it. And I think the ultimate irony is that one of the founding fathers of security really knew this, right? So I don't know if you've heard of this, of August Kerckhoffs. So if you speak to a security person, particularly a crypto person, about Kerckhoffs, they will go like, oh yeah, Kerckhoffs, right? Second principle, there's no security by obscurity. That's the second principle in his original writing. But I've never found a security person that knew about the other principle that Kerckhoffs wrote. He wrote 6 in total, and 3 of them are about usability, right? Because Kerckhoffs knew who would have to, the soldier who would have to carry this encrypted telegraph system on his back into the field and use it lying in the mud, trying to get something through, while the general is shouting at him. It's like, tell the other guy to move, his cannons, over there. So, and he had these rules, and arguably, the 5th one, we've managed to succeed. We can make things very small and portable, but that communicating and remembering keys with notes is still a huge barrier at the moment. But the final rule is, I think, it's just you should. Every security person should have that over their desk. The circumstances in which a security system is applied, it must be easy to use and must neither require the stress of mind nor the knowledge of a long series of rules. I'd go like, yes, please, can we get there? And really sooner rather than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Very inspiring presentation. I think I would just start with the question, and if someone else has questions, please just raise your hand, and then you can obviously ask your question. But so the main message is that, well, we should not aim for fixing the humans, but we should do something else. What would you suggest to do? I mean, you point out that security people need to change, but how do we get security people to change, to follow these things? I mean, you said all these things 20 years ago, but apparently, well, did anything change? I think not much, at least. What do we need to do?
A key problem is there's 2. There's the research and there is the practice angle to it, and they're interconnected. Number 1 is that is slowly starting to change, at least in the UK, that in the kind of training that security people do, this kind of design, basic design principles, and also basic of the what we call soft skills, the ability to actually present yourself as approachable, negotiation, effective communication, that kind of things. That's coming in to the certified security training programs, very slowly, but it's there. The other part of it is a serious scientific problem, and that is the dirty secret is that even security research, that huge parts of it are not scientific. There is no science and there is no discipline of science. This stuff is craft, right? It's somebody came up with a fix to a security vulnerability, and that was put in place. In 99%, I'm exaggerating a bit, but let's say 90% of them have never been evaluated by scientific standards, right? And that still happens in practice every day. Vulnerability, let's put a fix in. Whether that really is a security, looking at what is the cost of operating that security measure, it's just not done. And that has to change.
Good. So we have a couple of questions. The first one is Anke. Do you want to ask?
Yeah. Thanks a lot. This is really, it could be me, worrying about all my passwords and all these things. So this is really, really awful. And so I'm a cognitive psychologist now, and to me, there's one problem that products are developed and implemented by engineers, and there's the usability pipeline is a short week at the end. So there's not enough resources spent on that. But we can worry about this, and we do this, of course. But the question is really, what is the solution? So is there any, so that passwords are somehow uncivilized, this is clear, but what would be a better way? Would it be biometrics information? What would it be?
So the standard usability answer, it would be what fits to the user group, the task, and the context of use. There will never be, and I've been trying to say this for a long time, that was, again, it's a flaw in security people's thinking. There will never be a single replacement for passwords. Anybody who's trying to do that is coming up with the next utterly unusable security mechanism. You've got to fit it, right? And as much as possible, fit it to the extent that either it disappears or that it means users are carrying out a behavior that is natural as part of the task, or it's a protection behavior that is standard and has become a routine that they can just execute again and again without it creating a toll on them. But you've made a really important point is, I think developers are really getting a raw deal. I think at the moment what's happening, we know this from various studies, security and usability are offloaded onto them without them being given training or access to support. And also, I think there isn't enough information, the information that they need about who is using this, what is the primary task that people are doing in this situation, and in what physical and social context are they using it. That information the developers don't have. If I had $1 for every time a developer tells me, I've never spoken to anyone using this, I don't have any idea who's using that. That's basically this software development is not properly supported in companies at the moment.
So thank you so much for the talk. I really enjoyed it. And I think
thank you.
One of the big questions for me is sort of this between the disciplines. And I think last year or the year before, I wrote a short article in Interactions about don't blame it on the user. And I think colleagues in HCI found this very useful. I think it's and when I talked to some people at the security, it's basically, this soft science stuff. And I think they used worse words, but we are doing algorithms. And I think Florian probably living in sort of the environment with many of them around. So basically, they obviously they don't tell me that they don't take me serious on that, but it is very obvious that they think I'm playing sort of with Play-Doh and they are doing the real stuff. And I think we see this across many of those areas. And I think on the same point, I think without basically the hardcore, how they call themselves, security, we never get it right. I think that's also, I think we basically, a lot of the things we see from people in our community done is very much on the training side, and you stressed it's basically just tell people what they do, they're not doing it. So I think that in order to come up with the new solutions, and there I see from a funding perspective the problem, we never get basically proposals reviewed on the borderline. Either we kill it or they kill it. And so basically we stay in our side. So do you have an idea how we could push that forward? Because I think that's, I think it's an extremely important topic, and having sort of just yesterday night for somebody set up their online account, I was sort of completely taken aback. I haven't done it for 10 years. I've set up for somebody just an online account, and it took me 40 minutes and quite some computer science skills to do that. And I couldn't really believe that that this is happening at this time. But sort of the question, how do we get really the people together? Is it a new generation that we need, or what can we do?
That's two things. So one, yes, a new generation might help. So I moved to Bochum about 3 years ago, a bit more 3 years ago, and set up a new chair in human-centered security. And I've been really, so Bochum has the largest IT security academic training program in Europe. Got 1,000 bachelor's and master's students. I've been really surprised how interested the students were. So our bachelor level introduction course into usable security and privacy has between 150 and 200 students on a year. I mean, yeah, it's a pain for me, but I think it's really good news in general. So the interest is there. The master's courses we've opened up in the master's program, they're all basically being attended. We get so many requests for doing master's projects and bachelor's offering that the interest, I think the young people, actually a lot of them, particularly with the Germans, system being that a lot of them work as Werkstudenten or something in companies, and they actually can see these problems themselves. I think that's one route. The other route is really, I think the scientific issue is a huge one. In the UK, we kind of got, we got a long way down the road simply because the agency, the national agency responsible for IT security, decided to do a mapping of research strengths and weaknesses, and then teamed up with the equivalent of DFG. And they said, look, we realize here there's this interdisciplinary, and these people are, they're not getting funding from either of your programs. And let's set up a joint program where we put the focus on interdisciplinary research. And it was a long-term program. It's that Research Institute in Socio-Technical Security that Florian mentioned, which is now getting close to being 10 years in existence. And it brought together, it was basically a call for, there was funding there, and of people from all universities in the UK could apply. And they had a very, very good program of getting their own practitioners to attend. We had to have quarterly meetings. A lot of the academics were moaning about it, but quarterly meetings, and we had got the security practitioners come in and tell us about their problems from the agencies, from practice. And also when we had ideas, the practitioners were there, and we were asking for test beds. We were asking for field, for companies to volunteer for field trials and things like that to get the discipline going. And that was a way of how we managed to get it moving.
Jan.
Yeah, cool. Thanks from me also, Angela. That was a lovely talk, especially you managed to push my sort of boundary for the oldest user-centered quote back a couple hundred years with the 1800s person, and that it's a security expert is just hilarious. That's lovely. I think what you just told us about the IT bachelors, the security bachelors that is picking up usable security, I think that's one of the keys. But it also seems to be one that is surprisingly difficult to turn in its lock. As some of you know, because I had been talking to you folks, we tried to push for an HCI required course in the bachelor's in computer science in Aachen. And that just got flat out rejected without much discussion. So I think you're right in that we then just decided to open our course up to anybody who wants to come, and numbers doubled immediately. So I think you're right. The next generation is aware that this is important and is interested. But I think actually one of the hindrances or one of the blockades seems to be in the heads of current educators in the IT areas. They seem to be missing. I mean, we all know that there is a certain lack, as Albrecht was describing it, of respect for HCI from the computer science community as a whole. But in this particular respect, I think that's what's getting in the way. Because it just seems, and I think a lot of the folks that haven't had any exposure to any HCI thinking, they don't even know that there is a problem. That seems to me so obvious when I talk to people in practice. They're like, I didn't even know that could be an issue. So it's not like I don't want to deal with it, but it's the awareness isn't even there.
I find it's really surprising. I mean, I think in the UK, you know, in the computer science departments there, I'd be hard pushed to think of one that would take this attitude, you know, and would not have an HCI course. So
well, I'm talking required course, right?
Required,
That was the key thing. Certainly not completely disabling it, but putting it into the core curriculum. That seems to be just not
what I'm trying to do at the moment is, I mean, if I tried in Bochum, they wanted me to do it in the first year, and I just thought it would be, you know, given in the completely new degree program we're starting, I wasn't really sure that would work. So I think the stealth route is best, you know, is to go via requirements engineering and software engineering, and to embed really the core principles and context there, because I think that's the way we have to go anyway. I think a real issue is that both usability and security are underspecified. You know, they're just assuming this is something the developers will take care of, you know, without giving them any of the basic information you need in order to make a sensible decision. I think it's just nuts, right? And so it's just basically a hijack, you know, a good part of requirements engineering. And then in software engineering, the embedding, you know, and I'm talking to colleagues about it. I think the more we can, of course, embed it in the tools and the methods that the software developers use later on, the more we will, you know, that those are good points to actually get it in front of them, because I think we've got to be fair, and you know, most of them have this, you know, real pressure, functionality, usability, security, you know, and as somebody said, you know, they've got, like, in the last week, you know, they have to suddenly think about that's not going to work. You know, I think trying to really get it more into the pipeline, the software development pipeline, is a way forward.
Thomas.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Angela, for your delightful talk. I'm afraid I missed some of it because I was interrupted in the office. So apologies if you already went into this. Thank you very much for your insight on you know, security by design, by system design, and thereby security by default, so taking the user out of it. My question is, how far should we take this, and what can we reasonably expect our users to do? Because, you know, when it comes to physical security, we all carry around a set of house keys, and we're expected not to lose those, or to know which one fits which door. So what would be the equivalent of that in the digital world?
That's a really good question. And actually here it's like, you know, I'm actually not saying people don't have to learn anything. That would be patently nonsense. The risks in the digital domain are, you know, they do differ, and what you can use as trust signals and trust signals, it differs radically, and those are the things that I think people that we really need to talk to people about. So I think it's a twofold route. One is via the cognitive. I've come to the conclusion there've been an awful lot of papers on mental models, you know, to try and get people to use encryption or some other security mechanisms. And the more we've looked at it, we've come to the conclusion that is largely a futile attempt to make people into mini security experts, you know. So they're essentially trying to get structural models into the end users. Doesn't work. We've got to, you know, I think we know that we've got to go for functional models, but you can't build a functional model if the people don't understand the threat, because you want to say basically here's threat X, you know, or risk Y. If you don't want that to happen, this is what you need to do. So we need to communicate. People need to understand the threats in the digital domain better, and then we need to really start to develop a core set of secure behaviors, secure online behaviors that people can follow. I think that is the starting point. You know, once that is bedded in, I think we're making a lot of people make a terrible mistake that they're just really doing too much. They're telling people too much too soon and don't really give them a chance to really understand the basics, learn the basic protection behaviors, and then start to build on that. It's always like, the whole, you have to sit through a 2-hour training package at work, just keep clicking, yes, okay. And nobody believes it, and nobody remembers anything like half an hour after they finished it.
And I probably jump in with a question. So I just wanted to try and establish a link between usable security and the priority program in which we are here. So the priority program tries to sort of leverage pervasive computing for building novel interaction paradigms. And I'm wondering sort of whether usable security can build on this. So you told us before that security mechanisms usually do not account for things such as what is the information we are protecting, in which context is the use. So pretty much, so if you're looking at the phone, it doesn't matter whether I read a Spiegel Online article or whether I sort of access my emails or whether I write an instant message. It's all the same. And but with like technology sort of being in our devices, in our environments, I think we know much more about sort of the current things we are doing, who is around, what an imminent threat is. So where do you see that pervasive computing could probably help to address some of the challenges that are around since like 20 years?
Yes. So we would say it's a really good principle, when security is a secondary task, right? And the more you can just piggyback it, or make it happen as part of the primary actions that the user is taking, the better. And of course, in a pervasive environment, if you go for something like continuous authentication, there's really no need the user may ever need to do anything explicit to authenticate, right? You can just recognize the person making disappear. That, of course, creates completely different risks that you need to protect against, right? It creates basically risks that of your profile being built up, or also essentially, of the way through how the environment responds to you, of being manipulated through through that environment. And I think that's really, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's a really good challenge of we can't just look in this space for making security easy. I think it really challenges, it needs a completely different conception of what security actually is.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Albrecht has a follow-up.
Just basically picking up on this privacy security one. I recently talked to somebody who went to China on basically where now basically face recognition has become ubiquitous to an extent I would not have thought a few years back. And basically his argument was, this makes it really secure because everybody knows, or basically they know all the time where you are. So basically nobody can tell you did something you didn't do because it's very clear where you are. So basically this ubiquitous tracking, and my excitement was less big, but I think this is sort of different views, and I think taking this, I think a lot of the discussion take sort of face login on systems. I think even within our community, we are sort of very torn, basically. So I know people who will not allow in their company to use thumbprints, but not for security reason, but because the union has disagreed to store. And so basically people still have their posted with the 20-digit password under their keyboard because they're not allowed to use the. And so I think it's an interesting question. What are your thoughts on, especially if we now move forward, on how to balance this privacy security, because that's mainly in our court. And I think we see sort of in the HCI community, basically both directions being played, and then landing again sort of with solutions that have been around for a long time and don't work.
I suspect that we have to, that the only way of protecting, I think going down the route as they are in China, it is a control and manipulation route, and when it comes to, I find Andrew Odlyzko's argument that sort of that when you have no privacy, the consequences are so far-reaching. It destroys the market. He says in this catchy phrase, it's the end of capitalism. And that also means it's the end of the political system that's based on it, and it means you're just really, you're becoming a pawn that's manipulated by information oligopolies. And whether that's the state or whether that is a company at the end of the day doesn't really matter. So if you don't want that, then we need to really you need to shift the paradigm to saying, I control my own information, and I choose a mechanism to authenticate, whether it is the thumbprint or whatever, but I do it on my device, on the device of my choosing, and it communicates with your system and confirms that it's me. I'm not giving you my biometric information. See, it's a bit like, it's the same as we're now talking about self-sovereign identity in general. I don't put my information into the state system or the government system. I look after my information. There are mechanisms for checking that the information I give is accurate. But beyond that, I choose to whom I give what information. It's I think it's really, I found this, like, I recently talked to a few people about it. I found it really curious, this idea of self-sovereign identity. And then I think once you're there, you're thinking about, that you need different technical solutions. Isn't it? In the Anglo-American space, this has been there for over 10 years. They started setting up in the US, setting up these systems where you can look after your own information and self-certify rather than having to give that information. And here in Germany, it's only been, right, I think there's this LISI project, which I know Hasso-Plattner is one of the universities involved in it. And that's only 1 or 2 years old. But of course, then here in Germany, you get this absolute clash with the establishment, for whom it just can't be, they think questioning that the state has the monopoly on certifying somebody's identity, is bad. And really what they want is that we all use our Personalausweis online to prove our identity, right? That is the solution as far as they are concerned. I think in the journals that people haven't really quite gotten to this point, whereas in the UK, right, I can prove my identity and I can choose whether my bank confirms that it's me or the post office confirms that it's me, it can be it can be the big online, it's I think it's pretty predictable that some of the big online companies are also getting into this space, that Google will confirm to the government it's me. But I think here, really, in continental Europe and in Germany in particular, it seems to really kind of, seems unthinkable. But then basically the control would be great, but also, yes, making that usable. And believe me, I've one of my big challenges at the moment is making a zero knowledge proof understandable, because that's what you need for a lot of those mechanisms, is you need a zero knowledge proof. Explaining to people that they can trust this, they can trust it, even though they don't know who, they're passing this my information on, and they don't even know who it is, and the people who are receiving it don't know who actually certified my identity. That really, it's quite mind-boggling, and it's one of the things that we have to get across. I'm trying to find a mental model for that.
Probably one more question on the economic aspect. So you said that the motivation behind this, the user are not the enemy paper, was that the people who asked you to do this study wanted to cut down the cost for support. And today I'm really wondering like what role this economic aspect plays in security, because I think people are not really willing to pay for security. And as a result, security is the thing that most easily gets cut away when sort of a project is running sort of short on time and budget. And the question is, how can we overcome this? Or do you think this plays an important role? So because I think people often sort of then developers are usually sort of after time as soon as the project starts. And then I feel that very often they then just sort of re-implement or use an existing implementation for a security mechanism independent of how good or bad it is, simply because they don't have the resources to sort of come up with something reasonable. So it doesn't ultimately come down to whether or not we get, well, I don't know, ultimately probably the customers to...
Yeah, so you've got cost at different levels though, right? And that's why I'm a big fan, and I basically am more man. I want to work more with micro economists on this. Because once you start in a concrete environment, adding up, the total cost of ownership of operating a particular security mechanism, including how much time the employees spend on it, that they're then not spending on production, and the opportunity costs associated with that, and how many people give up trying to innovate because they think the security people are going to say no anyway. Once you start adding that up, I think then the business leaders start to see this is that it's a problem, and you've got to find you've really got to look at the pros and cons, not just the risk mitigation and how much does it cost me to buy this product, but you really also, you need this discipline, you need to look at the cost, and you need discipline to keep constantly evaluating whether it's really doing its job, because if it's not even particularly good, a particularly good security mechanism, and you have all this cost, and that's what I see, a lot of companies now, then that's just terrible, So I think really, and I try to train my students to always basically try and see the whole cost of it, and keep track of that. It's really important. That's so that's one step. So you asked something else, I forgot.
No, that's fine. I think
so it's I think you really have to keep. So when you talk about why are they reusing, why they're just reusing an old security mechanism, I think again the training isn't there. They're not being taught to do it. It's not made. They're not really being properly resourced. And of course, and there's a fascinating study by one of our PhD students who's just finishing, who looked at this in a company, and she found that there's two things in developers' mindset that work against security. So the one is it's a lose-lose proposition. I could spend an awful lot of time and effort on this, and still, if some skillful hacker comes along, it'll be broken and I'll be embarrassed, right? And that is fantastically, because that is exactly the same futility mental model we see in ordinary users as well, why they don't make it. The second one, and this is, I think, a particular problem in Germany, that they see security as a care function. And caring is an attribute that's not associated with the highly tribal male nature of German software developers. So what is it? 95% of software developers in Germany are male. And their value system, and the people who they think are particularly cool and so on, all of those, right, they go against security. It's not very high in the value chain. And so there's quite a bit of cultural change that has to happen with developers, as well as also supporting it, and actually giving them the information and giving them the training and embedding it in the tools as much as possible to reduce their workload.
Thanks. I think we can take a final question maybe from Albrecht.
It's more following up, sorry, on that one, because I think what you just said is probably really the key to changing it. And I'm not convinced that, I think it's a bit like as little as you can tell users how to improve security, you can tell developers to care. I think sort of I'm less convinced there. But the economic argument, I think that's an interesting one. And I think at the moment we had more discussions on the link to security and insurances, because I think once there is a business case, the pressure on companies to get it right becomes huge. We know basically if it's not a soft requirement, make it secure or make it usable. If it's basically a hard requirement, so basically if you don't get an insurance anymore, I think if I have a house and I have windows that are really bad and I cannot lock my front door, I will not get a house insurance in Germany and probably in the most countries. So basically, I have to provide basic security in order to get the insurance. Now, as we move to more valuable content online, basically money stolen from accounts, identity theft, whatever sort of things, I think once, so my take would be once insurances get into that business, they could really change the game, because then it could be say, you cannot use Google Mail, because they have password login. Basically, if you use this, your inventory is not insured. So I think basically moving it that way. But it was just when you said this, and perhaps what is sort of this, to basically change the economics, because I think with the current economics, I'm not really seeing, because it's like we said with usability, it's something once in certain places where you can prove it reduces time, people will put a lot of effort in there. In other places, they just won't.
Actually, the insurance companies that I've come across that are most innovative in this space are actually not taking the traditional approach of like, you have to have this kind of like standard of Windows, and God help you if you haven't locked it, once in 10 years, and then you get recognition. They the ones that I think are taking a really interesting approach, of course, to some extent it's a black box, right? They see where they get the incidents and how much they're costing, and they're trying to reduce the cost of that. But how they've responded is that they, for instance, they say, rather than saying to my customers, you must have a security awareness and training program, they go out and find the one that they think best and is most relevant to their customers, and offer it to them for free. Right? And if your employees take it, and you can prove they've taken it, you get a discount. They're also looking at which protection mechanisms did companies have that weren't breached into, and put that, and put that out, and they go like that cuts the likelihood of 80%. That's huge for us. And the other thing is they look at where do the costs occur. And it actually turns out when you get breached, a lot of the cost occurs post-breach, because especially when you don't have specialists, you don't know how to actually deal with this. And they do things that make things worse. So you get 2 to 3 hours free triage from a top-notch post-breach company. That will help you to actually secure the system, secure the data, and find the quickest way to getting your business up and running again. And those interventions, they're economically sensible. And I think I like that way of thinking. Of course, from a scientific point of view, it's not necessary. It's a black box, right? I mean, they just care that it works and that the numbers go in the right direction as a result. They don't care whether we can explain how it works, But I find that quite, I find that quite helpful, and I think once security people start talking to them, they're also starting to see that maybe there's actually a different way of thinking about this.
I think that makes a nice conclusion, to always keep in mind that there might be other things or other ways of thinking about things. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much
for this very inspiring session. That was awesome.